Welcome to our weekly discussion program. We call it Moral Side of the News, and we're glad you're with us this week. I'm John Blim with the Whas Crusade for Children. With me, as usual, is a smaller but distinguished panel this week. Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition. Reverend Jason Crosby, Crescent Hill Baptist Church. And Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville. Our first topic, this week in Ukraine. The question is, do you trust that Russia is withdrawing? The Pentagon is seeing small numbers of Russian troops repositioning, but not labeling it a withdrawal, as Russia has stated. The U.S. remains skeptical that Russia is genuine in negotiations to end this war. So turning to our panel, so let's get your thoughts on trust in general and a peaceful end to the conflict that has killed so many and displaced 4 million Ukrainians.
Well, you mentioned the word trust, John. I think, and I quote Ronald Reagan a lot on this one quote, my famous Ronald Reagan quote, which is trust but verify. You can't trust the Russians because they're not trustworthy. So you can't trust anything they say, but you can believe what they do. So I think that is the basis upon any relationship with the Russians, is to be able to verify what they do, and because you cannot trust what they say. If you recall, they said at the outset that they were not going to attack. But now we know a month in that they did indeed attack. So they contradicted themselves at the outset, and many warned that they would do it. Even President Joe Biden said they would do it, and they did it. So when it comes to trusting the Russians, you cannot do that, but you can verify whether what their actions are trustworthy by what they do. And recognize we're not playing checkers, we're playing chess. And so you have to proceed accordingly. And so I think that is the only footing you can take in any dealings with the Russians at this point.
Clay, I'd caution on one thing. I don't always speak of the Russian people, but it's obviously the Russian leadership in Putin right now. And I make a clear distinction because there are many good Russians. And I think a lot of other people are saying that if the Russian people knew this, if they knew more facts about it, I don't think they'd be in favor of this at all, but they're getting everything hidden from them. Although a lot of information in this social media age, and the Ukrainians are excellent at this, they may be getting more information than we realize sometimes. But I agree with trust but verify. So far, there's nothing that's been trustworthy about this whole process. But if there's a glimmer of peace, and it's a possibility, I'm all for it, because God knows what we see in our televisions is just so sad. It brings tears to your eyes every time you see what's happening. 4 million people, that's 10% of the country has now moved to Poland. Of course, I don't know how Poland's been able to do all of that either. Can you imagine 4 million people coming to our country all of a sudden, and we're a lot bigger?
Thank you, Father Joe. I would just add that prior to the beginning of the war, when there were 180,000 troops at the Ukrainian Belarus border and at the Ukrainian-Russian border, Russian officials, including Putin, said that they were just there for exercises, but the world knew that not to be true. And so that's just one small example that's directly related to statements that he has made about this particular situation. But on top of all that, regarding his formal statements that Putin might make regarding, or military leaders regarding their strategies, not only can that not be trusted by the rest of the world. I saw an interesting article yesterday. The mayor of the city of Mariupol, which has been under heavy siege, was held hostage by Russian soldiers for several days, eventually found his way to freedom and got out of their grasp. And he conducted an interview, and he said that these Russian troops really thought that they were there to defeat Nazis in Mariupol, to which he said, no, I've lived here my entire life, and I've never in this city encountered a Nazi. Well, they said, well, we're here to help defend and protect those who were veterans of World War II who fought on the side of Russia that might be living in this city. And the mayor informed them that, yeah, there are a handful of World War II veterans that remained in the city, but they loved being there, and they were revered by the other members of the community. All that's to say, Putin has not only lied to the West time and time again, Putin is lying to his own people, including the soldiers that he is putting in harm's way without any justification or grounding in truth, it appears oftentimes. So the danger of propaganda, the danger of the lies that he has spun are not only having devastating effects on the people in Ukraine, but the Russian people as well. And so, yes, trust and verify, but until there is a lot of rebuilt trust, I will always be skeptical of what Russian leadership has to say, and especially given what apparently they're telling their own people.
Well, Jason, the sad reality is that all this is the the aftermath of the culmination of the lies that was reverberating here with the previous administration. We cannot disconnect the two. Even the previous president is still now daring to appeal to Putin to bring out some dirt on the Biden family, and et cetera. I mean, so it's all a reverberation and a connection of the same kind of climate of lies that has just kind of clouded the world. I'm so grateful for media that has the courage to put themselves in harm's way to tell the truth. We've already had journalists who have perished in the attempts to get the truth out in protection of our First Amendment for the freedom of the press. That is the First Amendment, I think, for a reason, because we in America, we do have the benefit, we have historically had the benefit of a free press that has protected us from the kinds of perils that's taking place with respect to not only the Russian people, but the people of the Ukraine, the soldiers there. I'm told, I just realized yesterday in the news, that many of the Russian soldiers themselves are afraid to tell the truth, and high officials are afraid to tell the truth to Putin because things are not going as well as things may appear, and things are just going to get from bad to worse. So the climate of lies and being preferring the lie over truth, you can't even rely upon the truth coming from your own soldiers on the front line, because you have created such a climate where truth has no place in your administration and in your governing power of that country. So that's a sad reality. And so it's going to play itself out. Of course, I think ultimate truth will play out and show itself. But the sad reality, there's a lot of carnage that will be created along the way until that happens.
That whole issue of misinformation, we can blame the Russian leaders for that, but we see so much of it in our own country sometimes. I mean, it just amazes me to think about that Russian TV is showing a certain American channel, their nightly news in Russia, because it coincides with what Putin wants to get out to his people. Who would have thought of that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50, 60 years ago? But misinformation, I think, on all sides is really a disturbing part of this. And I think this whole war raises a lot of questions morally about what has been called the just war theory and Christian theology, and grounding for what is just war. When you're targeting civilians, when you are using possibly chemical weapons, when you're threatening to use nuclear weapons, we just don't have any moral framework for that type of accept to condemn that it's not moral, which I think says that to all countries at this point in time. Can any war be just? That is going to have world implications at this point in time. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that go on with this whole Ukrainian situation, but it's amazing to me how Ukraine has survived. I didn't think they'd last a week. Praise God. And of course, how many of these refugees can we take in? You know, we've got to ask a lot of questions. 100,000 refugees in this country is a lot more than we're accepting. And I think last year we only accepted 60,000 for the whole year from all over the world. That's going to have implications too.
All right, you're watching and listening to Moral Side of the News and Panel. Our second topic, while the Russian invasion of Ukraine continues on Earth, in space, it's a peaceful coexistence between NASA astronauts and Russian cosmonauts aboard the International Space Station. NASA's Mark Vande Hei returned to Earth this week with 2 cosmonauts landing in a Soyuz capsule in Kazakhstan. Vande Hei said they got along fantastically, and a cosmonaut said, "People have problems on Earth. In space, we are all one crew." So, panel, why does it take travel to space to show what's possible?
Well, I think in part to the very conversation that we were just having. And it has to do with the way in which the perspectives and the frameworks through which we understand and operate in the world get formed by the environments in which we find ourselves, that then have significant implications morally, physically, for people's lives. I'd imagine, I have not been on the International Space Station, although I wouldn't mind visiting. But yes, I'd imagine in that context, the principal narrative that binds folks together is the common mission of survival in space with a small crew. So that moral framework, that common purpose does take away other points of division that then you have here on Earth. But I hope that one thing that will be a silver lining from the recent turmoil that our world has experienced, our nation has experienced, our world has experienced, is the way in which our moral compass gets formed. What are the values and voices that are influential in that process? And then how important those moral and ethical perspectives really are at either bringing about some reconciliation and some healing or some division. And certainly when those cosmonauts and the astronauts have returned to Earth, all of a sudden the context in which they're operating and the framework and the expectations around them, the information that they'll be receiving, the truth that they perceive to be digesting that serves as guiding lights is very, very complicated at ground zero relative to the, I guess, relatively comfortable confines, at least in some respects, of life on a space station.
Well, you framed it perfectly and poetically, Jason. You said a couple of words about community. Yeah, that's the key word, community. There is a unique and common community when you're in outer space. It's a very small, close-knit community, but it's a community that thrives on surviving. It brings to mind what Dr. King famously said: either we live together as brothers or we perish together as fools. So there is a survival imperative to seek brotherhood, and the space experience kind of illustrates that in a very dramatic way, especially in contrast with what you see taking place with the wars as in Ukraine. Of course, we're going to talk about Oxford in just a second, but because of that common ground and the common need for a community to survive, then the cosmonauts and the astronauts, they agree on that, and they see that as being essential to survival. I'm old enough to remember, Jason, when Sputnik in 1957 went into space. In fact, I was about 5 years old then. my cousin, his nickname was Sputnik because he was born in 1957. So my uncle nicknamed him Sputnik after the Russian space ship that went into space in 57. So I remember that well, and how that captured the imagination of the world, and how the United States regarded that venture. Of course, it challenged us to go and do likewise with our space exploration as well. So when you start getting in outer space, you get out of the space of race, out of the space of confusion, out of the space of stealing few little pieces of land on Earth when the whole Earth is small when you get out of space. So just a lot of things you get a different perspective, literally, probably psychologically, no doubt spiritually. The higher up you go, I think there's some moral correlation to that as well. The higher up you go, the more perspective you get on how small things are. Was the popular book out? Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. And there's no truer than when you're in outer space. It's all small stuff when you get in outer space. So I think there's a lot of life lesson that can be derived. And I think that the outer space encounter between the astronauts and the cosmonauts is probably a great little example of how brotherhood can be indeed formed to create community that is essential for all of our survival on Earth.
I was privileged a couple of weeks ago when I was visiting some friends in Florida to go to the Kennedy Space Center and do the tour of the Space Center, which was mind-blowing. We thought we could do it in 3 hours. We were there 7 hours and probably saw less than half of it. But we actually got to kind of walk through the shuttle and see it and see the Saturn V rockets and all that kind of stuff. But I guess I'm always stunned by the picture of the world seen from outer space, as you said, Clay, that from outer space, it's just a planet. It's water and land, and everybody on it is all one. And I always think that's one of the most powerful images. And we're just a speck in a solar system and a cosmos that's even larger than that. Mm-hmm. Gives us perspective to some of our fights, even our political fights here in this country or anywhere else. They're so minor compared to the world picture. And I think that's what world religions tell us all the time. And I think it's up to us ecumenically and in interfaith to kind of say, okay, let's see the big picture and not the small picture.
I'd just quickly add that while the International Space Station is in outer space, and that's a context in which some community can be formed that is unique. The reality is that, and folks are rowing in one direction to survive under those conditions. The reality is that planet Earth is growing more like the International Space Station on a daily basis. And it is imperative, despite the complications that come with life lived at a granular level, that we begin to recognize some of the fragility of the space station known as planet Earth as we are hurtling through orbit, and the importance of working together and taking care of this mothership.
I like that. Quick question. Who owns the International Space Station? Who owns it?
It's a consortium, as I understand it.
A consortium of
different countries.
Of which Russia and America are part of that consortium. Okay. So that's a good microcosm. Jason, you painted a very, very excellent picture that the Earth, and I'll just make a distinction between Father Joe mentioned that he mentioned the word world and Earth. World and Earth are two different things. Sometimes they use interchangeably. Earth is a planet. World, if you look up the definition, means the existence of humans. So even though we use it interchangeably, Earth describing the planet is the term to describe the mass. World actually is the existence of humans that occupy the planet Earth. So with that in mind, there's a different way to preserve the existence of Earth. and quite naturally, a different way you go about preserving the existence of the world, which is the existence of humans. And how we conduct ourselves on earth will determine whether we survive in the world together. So I think that little space is a good little pleasant, I guess, example of just what's possible. And with the different perspective, you're able to see the difference and challenge us, because, you know, the world can be, and the earth can be destroyed in the twinkling of an eye with all the countries that have the power of atomic energy. So we need to be mindful of that.
All right, let's get a little closer to home for our third topic. A sad last chapter is being crafted for a famed Louisville business. After 80 years, Hadley Pottery will close its doors. The company says rising costs of materials and repairs to decades-old equipment is forcing them to make this difficult decision. So turning to our panel, moral side of the news, we all lose when an institution like this closes, don't we?
Well, I mentioned at the outset, John, that I had a personal experience with the Hadley pottery, Miss Hadley herself personally. My father, back in the 1960s, was a very popular and high demand painter, paper hanger, interior decorator. And on several occasions, I worked in her home doing some painting and some work that my father was doing. Horace Calloway did work in her very fine home, an exotic home at the time up on Story Avenue. So it hits kind of home with me, brings back some memories from my childhood. In that home. It was a very eclectic environment, artistic environment, and she was a famous person then. Well, of course, I didn't appreciate her fame and notoriety then as much as now, but I did have a personal experience with the Hadley home, as well as the Hadley pottery company at the time. Sad to see it leaving.
I was going through part of my kitchen closets and how many Hadley pottery cups I have from different things, and obviously Derby cups and things like that I've given away. And those are some of my favorite cups. So it was always kind of a uniquely Louisville, but a unique thing that it's so sad to see something like this. We get so much in these big box store things that we lose the individuality and the artistic value of people on a local level. And I don't think we're better off for that. I think somehow we've got to find a way to make sure that local companies like the Hadley Company can survive in this world. But of course, the pandemic didn't help anybody anywhere.
Well, I have a problem, gentlemen. I don't know where I'm going to go to get my mother's Christmas gift next year. And I assume I am not alone.
You can still order it from Hadley until the 6th of April.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. But no, certainly if you have connections to Louisville in any capacity, Hadley has probably been on a table where you have dined. Has been present in the shelves on a home. And so it's not just an important Louisville business, it's kind of a cultural touchstone in the fabric of our community, and certainly one that will be missed. However, those bowls and plates and cups, they have staying power. So I suspect we'll continue to see them around.
Well, you're going to make me want to rush out and find one somewhere, at least have one in my home. I don't possess any Hadley items, but I'm going to see if I can, I'm sure the demand would probably skyrocket, but I'm going to try if I can find one and bring one to my home. So remember Hadley and also the work that my father did in the Hadley home.
Excellent. Panel, we've got about 4 minutes left. There's a couple of topics not on the script, but we're going to touch upon anyway. Father Joe, we're going to turn to you. A new installation of a new Archbishop this week.
Well, yeah, it was history for our diocese. This has only happened twice in the last 40 years. When Archbishop Thomas Kelly came here in '82, which is 40 years ago last month, and then Archbishop Joseph Kurtz came in August of '07. And obviously historic that he's the second Archbishop of African-American descent. He has family actually in Louisville. I did not realize that until I was at St. Martin de Porres Parish a couple of weeks ago, and they said, "Oh, he's our cousin." And I said, "Oh, that's a good connection," and all that kind of stuff. Comes from Louisiana. Don't know him well. I've met him a couple of times. Seems very gentle, very articulate, has an excellent education in Louvain. Very gentle man. I kind of get the impression he doesn't like a lot of foo-foo, and a lot of people making a fuss. You could tell that a little bit even yesterday, but I think he's going to be good as a good listener for our diocese, and we certainly need that right now.
Well, we wish him the best of luck. We'll jump from that into the topic that's the only show that has not had the lead of this topic of Chris Rock and Will Smith is this show. But Reverend Clay Calloway, some thoughts from you. You wanted to kind of sneak this in. We got about 2 minutes left.
It was a slap heard around the world. I mean, that's one way to capture it. I'm going to be talking about it on the radio show this weekend. But there's so many takeaway lessons. You can learn a lot of good lessons from bad examples. I think it was unprecedented in more ways than one. So I've been talking about it just about it. I just cannot stop compiling data that I'm seeing, some of it good, some not so good regarding this. I think there's a lot of takeaway lessons here about reaction, overreaction. I think the star of that whole episode was Chris Rock, how he responded. I'm trying to bring him to Louisville. A good friend of mine's daughter is the road manager for Chris Rock here in Louisville, and I'm trying to bring him to Louisville. So I think his conduct stands head and shoulders about everything. He literally saved that show by his conduct. And I think that's one takeaway we all can appreciate from that episode.
All right. Any other thoughts on Chris Rock and Will Smith, or should we just let that rest?
Yeah, I saw some of the show. I thought it's interesting, especially the movies, and I like a lot of Will Smith stuff, but that was certainly over the top, although don't insult somebody's wife. That's for sure.
Excellent. Well, go Jason, last word.
I would just say that I hope and pray that there is still room, even though at times it can be disrespectful and step on some toes, for comedy. We need that vehicle to be able to critique that which is difficult to critique, and the comedic vehicle is really important for us as a society. And I hope that folks in comedy clubs in Louisville won't get up and slap somebody in the future. It's important not to.
And that's why they have comedians at those shows to bust those bubbles.
A good way to end our program talking about comedy. We can't beat that. Thanks to Reverend Clay Calloway, Reverend Jason Crosby, and Father Joe Graffis. And Reverend Clay, I'm still stuck on your cousin's nickname being Sputnik, but we'll save nicknames for another show. If you'd like to catch this program again, we
talk about it on TV.
You can watch Moral Side on YouTube. Thanks, panel. We'll see you again next week. Have a great week. In just a few months, we'll be celebrating the 69th annual WHAS Crusade for Children. But you don't have to wait. You can get involved right now by going to whascrusade.org. That's whascrusade.org, and make a secure online donation.